And welcome into a new week of covering people, power, and politics in a busy election season. I'm Roop Raj. We're glad you trust us to bring you the unbiased political news each and every night. Whether it's live or DVRing us to watch later, we'll make sure that we live up to that promise each and every night. Whether you were watching college or pro games, there was a lot of political news that happened over the weekend. We'll get you caught up, including a reality check that you need to know about if you want to be an informed voter. And we are just one night away from the showdown between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. This show, as you know, is for all people. And of course, we are here putting two voters in the spotlight, one a Trump supporter, another a Harris supporter. We asked them what they want to hear about on that debate stage from both the candidates. And this debate is taking on added significance. Not only is it the first time we're seeing Vice President Harris on the debate stage since she took over that ticket, but it could be the only time we see both of these folks on stage until you vote in November. You see, they don't have a second debate scheduled. The only other one is between the two vice presidential candidates that's coming up in October. And since this show is all about you, we wanted to hear from you about this showdown. So we hit the streets to get a pulse check asking if you're waiting to decide who you're voting for until after the debate. Take a look.
Harris. Gotta vote for Harris. You already know. Also Harris.
So you're not waiting on the debates?
I don't need to wait on the debates, but I'm interested to see it, but not really waiting.
You know, I actually am. I really, I want to do a little bit more research before I decide to just vote for anybody.
I already got my vote in who I'm going with.
Okay.
It ain't Trump.
Nope. I put my own name on the ballot.
That could work for you, but probably not for anybody else at that point. In case, we didn't meet you on the street, we actually want to get your thoughts online. If you want to vote in our poll, just scan that QR code on the bottom right of your screen. So far, the vast majority of you say no. In fact, 90% say they're not waiting for the debate to decide who they're voting for. And some of you are chiming in on social media. In fact, Curtis tweeted at me saying, I'm undecided for the first time. I dislike both parties and candidates. I want to see someone who has more self-control and able to answer tough questions without deflecting or lying. I have very little hope in either side doing well. But on the other side, Old School had this to say to Fox 2. If anyone is that indecisive, they probably shouldn't vote. Once you sift through the nonsense, the decision who to vote for should already be settled. Well, it took until last week for the two sides to agree on the rules for the debate, and it'll look pretty similar to the format for the debate between former President Trump and Biden. The biggest thing here, microphones will be muted. That was a source, as you remember, of a lot of drama within the last couple of weeks, and something the Harris camp says will be to her disadvantage because they say, the Harris camp, that the viewers won't hear Trump's outbursts. It'll be a 90-minute debate with 2 commercial breaks in all, and the moderators will be the only ones asking the question. There will be no studio audience, and written notes won't be allowed on that podium. ABC also will not share the topics or questions in advance, but you can imagine what they're going to be because we all know what everybody and their brother is talking about. So after the debate, Harris and her running mate are actually planning a whirlwind tour through several key swing states, including right here in Michigan. Harris will be out in North Carolina on Thursday, while her running mate, Walz, will actually campaign on the west side of Michigan, speaking at an event in Grand Rapids. You'll see a lot of people heading the west side of the state as well. Walz will stay in our state on Friday and move a little further east, if you will. He'll be in the Lansing area for an event that afternoon before traveling to Wisconsin that evening. Vice President Harris will be in Pennsylvania. And finally, one more pulse check before tomorrow's debate, just showing how razor thin this margin is right now. The latest Real Clear Politics average shows Vice President Harris leading by a little more than a point, 1.2. Again, we always say polls only mean so much. We should mention that there's yet another poll that shows Donald Trump is ahead by a point. So it's notable considering it's a slight drop, though, this one from the 1.9 she had earlier last week. Look, when you're talking about 1.2, 1.9, this is anyone's race. And both of these people know it, Trump and Harris. And by the way, former President Trump is taking a stance on marijuana that's similar to his opponents. He actually signaled he'd support reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug. Trump also said he'd vote yes on a proposal to let adults buy marijuana really for any reason in his home state in Florida. VP Harris backs decriminalizing marijuana, calling it, quote, absurd that the DEA has it in the same category as heroin. She oversaw enforcement of cannabis laws earlier in her career. You may remember that when she ran for Attorney General in California. That was back in 2010. She opposed legalized recreational pot. Political news never takes a break, not even when it's football season. And if you were watching the games, you weren't alone. Hey, we were too. Go Lions. But our news team was also keeping tabs on the political score between Trump and Harris. There was a lot that happened in the last few days, and we're working for you tonight, bringing you some of the stories that you might have missed over the weekend. So in case you missed it, a spending bill could see a serious fight, but not because of the actual cash, the money. Remember, that voting bill we told you about, where Republicans want to require proof of citizenship for voter registration. Well, they're tying it to the 6-month spending bill, with just weeks to go before the October 1st deadline to avoid a partial government shutdown. House Speaker Mike Johnson is holding off on a full budget when there's a new Congress and president in office. In the meantime, though, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries blasted the move in a letter to Congress saying this: the partisan and extreme continuing resolution put forth by House Republicans is unserious and unacceptable. In order to avert a GOP-driven government shutdown that will hurt everyday Americans, Congress must pass a short-term continuing resolution. Speaker Johnson, meantime, had this to say.
We all know intuitively that a lot of illegals are voting in federal elections, but it's not been something that is easily provable. We don't have that number. This legislation will allow us to do exactly that. It will prevent that from happening.
All right, we do this for everyone, Republicans and Democrats. We fact-check things. Speaker Johnson's comments have us running this fact-check so you know what's real here. Research shows cases of non-citizens voting are actually extremely rare. But it fuels a claim by former President Trump that Democrats encourage the surge of migrants. Why? So they can register more of them to vote. And by the way, the law they're pushing is actually, well, unnecessary, according to some. And here's why that's true. Because it's trying to protect against something that's already illegal in our country. It's already a felony for non-citizens to register to vote in federal elections. And federal law actually bans them from voting in state elections, protecting both the federal and the state integrity. As we always say, we protect facts on this show. We don't protect candidates or lawmakers. And if someone says something that goes against the facts, left or right, we'll be here to do a reality check because it's the difference between what's right and wrong. And a huge back and forth involving former independent candidate for president Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The Michigan State Supreme Court ruling today he'll stay on the ballot. That ruling reverses one by an appeals court which said he would be taken off. The justices said in the ruling that Kennedy did not show any case law that would require the Secretary of State to take his name off, even though he withdrew from the race last month and endorsed former President Donald Trump. He's also fighting to get his name off of Wisconsin's ballot, by the way. Federal judges did order his name off the ballot in North Carolina. And with that, my friends, you're now all caught up, and you're a happy Lions fan as well. Something we can all get on board with. Red and blue, right? Back now on the Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics from the D to D.C., and we're looking ahead to tomorrow's debate. Joining us in the hot seat, Terry Bean, a voter who has voted both ways in many elections, and he joins us now. And by the way, coming up in our next segment, we'll be talking to someone who is probably leaning more right, and so we're trying to get not necessarily an undecided voter, but someone who is open-minded about both candidates. And we thank you, Terry, for joining us here tonight on the Pulse.
I appreciate being here, man. I'm excited.
Let's talk about this. You have, Trump and Kamala Harris, but in general, you have voted, you say, for both Republicans and Democrats in past elections.
Absolutely. I'm a candidate person and an issue person, far more than a party person. Always have been and always will be.
And our coin flip says that you go first as a Democrat here today, but for no particular reason. But as we talk about this, I want to ask you a little bit about what you expect Kamala Harris to talk about in this debate, or what do you think one of her main points will be to come out against Trump?
I think she's got to talk about the economy. I think she's got to set the record straight on immigration, for sure. And I hope she doubles down and talks about the infrastructure, because the progress that I've seen just in our area here in Detroit over the past couple of years, you can't go anywhere north, south, east, or west without hitting it, and that's part of the infrastructure piece. Where that money came from, that bill, it seems like. And so you fact-checked that.
No, we fact-checked it just now, actually. The Biden-Harris administration did pass that infrastructure bill that was more than $1 trillion and helped give money to things like charging stations, things like roads and bridges. But let me ask you this, in terms of spending. When you look at what Harris has to do to separate herself from Biden, what are some of those things that you think she needs to do? Because we know that we were in an inflationary period for a good amount of time, and people were struggling, and maybe still are, to pay for their groceries. How do you, when pocketbooks are the most important thing in the world, try to separate yourself from Biden, or do you?
I think you kind of have to, whether you're separating yourself from Biden or just from the corporate overlords that we seem to be feeling the pinch of, I think you have to have that conversation. You know, I look at Kroger having record profit, I look at ExxonMobil having record profit, and entities like that, and, you know, the prices haven't really gone down that has positively affected my pocketbook, right, or yours.
So you're basically saying at this point, when we hear Biden and Harris say corporate greed, the translation of that is, hey, we've brought inflation down to a reasonable place, but the grocery stores and some of these businesses have not.
That's right, and they could have. Right, there was, I believe I just read, and I didn't read the whole thing, but that they were gouging, right? They were convicted, Kroger, of gouging, and that's been going on for a long time, and that's why my wife comes home every week and tells me what the price of eggs are, right? It's
well,
like, it's an interesting conversation.
And there are so many grocers across the board that we would have to literally sit down and talk to and say, how did this work? Let's see some paperwork here, because bottom line is that is a political point that we're hearing from Kamala Harris about the price gouging. I want to talk to someone who's a Republican now, who's joining us on The Pulse, a woman that you may probably know well. Her message about what she thinks needs to happen in terms of what Donald Trump needs to say relative to the economy. Take a listen.
I think that the former President Trump, what he needs to deliver to the millions of Americans that are asking for relief from the increasing cost of living is a strong economic message centered on American workers and American businesses, not on some complicated trade scheme, not on some quasi-socialistic cost control mechanism, but good old-fashioned American dream. How can me and my kids have a better life for generations to come?
What happens at the debate, Terry Bean, when the economy comes up and these two go at it? You know what Donald Trump's going to say. How does Kamala Harris respond in your mind as someone who supports her?
I think she's got to go take it on at the Wall Street level. I think she's got to have that conversation, and I think she's got to, I look at it from my own perspective. I'm still trying to figure out, how is the Dow Jones as high as it is when it doesn't seem like it could be, right? We've been talking about a recession now for 4 years. We should have that conversation. What are we going to do to prove ourselves safe against that? Because that's a scary thing.
What about staying safe against fentanyl and against some of the bad elements of the migrants that come into this country? Kamala Harris, whether or not she was a czar or not, if we take that argument out of this, would you say you think that Kamala Harris did a good job with the border?
I don't think she did a good job with the border at all, right? It's quantifiable that she did not. Is it gotten better? Yes. Is it got a long way to go? Yeah. But, I mean, that's top to bottom. There's a whole policy beyond that. It shouldn't take as long to become a citizen as it does either.
Let's talk about the tenor of this debate. We know that Donald Trump, as of right now, our sources within the Trump camp say his idea of preparing is to meet with senior advisors and talk about policy points, so he's armed with that. But he's not going to do a debate practice. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, has a hotel room apparently with lights on and someone standing in as Donald Trump, and they're going to town on this debate. Is there any amount of preparation that can get you ready for someone like Donald Trump?
I don't think so, unless you have somebody that is of that mindset, who's not going to talk policy, mostly, who's only going to attack, right? And he's going to be on the defensive. You said earlier in the monologue that having the mics off wasn't something that Kamala wanted to see happen, and it's with good reason.
Does she need to attack back?
She needs to. It's an interesting thing, right? When Obama was around, when Michelle said, when they go low, we go high.
Does that work anymore?
They seem to have gone low at the announcements at the DNC, right? They were not staying high then, and I think, you know, sometimes you punch a bully square in the mouth and they stop being a bully.
Is that a necessary evil?
It's how it works, man. And I'm not an advocate for that behavior, but, you know, you can only roll around in the dirt with the pigs for so long.
One last thing, we want to get Abby mentioned here one more time. Abby, a conservative voice with what Harris needs to do to win, and then a final thought from you.
Yeah.
Abby.
I think she needs to show that she is presidential, which I don't think is a card in her deck. We've seen over the last couple of weeks her play every imaginable role, from Southern, you know, buddy to union worker to, you know, you name it. Kamala Harris has put that suit on, but none of them have been president of the United States.
Conservative voice, someone who supports Kamala Harris. Do you agree?
I think she's got a decent point, but you're trying to play to the people, right? And so my secret to success is always meet people where they are. So I think if she's doing that and she's doing a decent job of it, that's great. For her to say that Kamala is not presidential, and when we're comparing her to somebody who's not presidential, I don't feel like that's a comparison.
Well, the only thing that's going to matter in that room tomorrow night, obviously, is going to be Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and those moderators. No audience, and that's just going to be the two of them and talking about these really important points that we hear here on this set every night. Back now on The Pulse, looking at everything people, power, and politics. We say people all the time because this is about you. And when we talk to everyday good Detroiters and Americans, it's about keeping the conversation going about things that are really important to people who are watching, including the debate that's happening, of course, tomorrow between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And Pastor Lorenzo Sewell, if you recognize him, the Trump campaign actually called Pastor Sewell and said, we'd like to come to your church, and made a stop in Detroit a few months back. Then you spoke at the RNC as one of the distinguished speakers. And you have some very strong feelings about why you think Donald Trump is good for America. But I want to point something out that's very interesting. You're going to be on a very select phone call with Trump. Talk about that for a moment.
So we will be praying for the president. And this is one of the reasons why I stand by Donald Trump. I stand by the Republican Party because I am pro-prayer. I believe prayer is important. I believe that people need spiritual hope, especially in places like Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw, the places that we're called to serve.
And you are going to be with a group of other pastors on the phone with former President Trump, and you will be praying together on the phone.
We'll be praying for him.
For the debate.
For the debate.
Is it the debate? Is the debate something that he needs to worry about relative to his performance versus Kamala Harris, who, of course, as you know, is a prosecutor, an attorney general, a district attorney, and a vice president? She's well stacked in the qualifications.
It's Madam Vice President, right? I mean, she's amazing at what she does in terms of a debate. President Trump, he needs to be able to take some of the real estate New Yorker out of him, right? And put more of the president inside of him in terms of the way he responds to the questions, maybe when things are said that he doesn't agree with. He has an opportunity to have the right posture and the right tone, and that's what we're praying for. We're praying that he would present himself as somebody that we believe God is called to lead our country.
Now, after the assassination attempt, which I don't care if you're red or blue, if you don't think that was a dark day in America, you got to check the dark spot in your soul there, because that was a terrible day. Yeah. But he came out after that and he said that I'm going to be a different kind of presidential candidate, and I'm going to show unity and I'm going to show decorum. That didn't last long. Does he need to return to that promise?
You know, I really wish he would, right? But I do believe people need to be who they are. I was with him on that Monday. Remember, he got shot at on that Saturday, just 30 days before. We prayed for him at our church that God would protect him. So we really thank God that he was able to protect the former president. And on that Monday, when I saw him, he was a different man. He came from within, 24 hours of being assassinated.
He looked humble.
Right.
He looked touched. He looked emotional. A piece and a part of him that we had never seen before, at least publicly. So in such big numbers, right? And so what does he need to do in this debate to showcase that presidential side of him? Talk about what?
I think he needs to talk about policies, right? Both of these candidates are both incumbents in a sense, right? Vice President Harris, she has been the vice president for 4 years. Former President Trump for 4 years. So in a sense, they've kind of already debated in terms of what they've done in the past. I believe he needs to paint a picture of policies for America that everyone can wrap their mind around and kind of take some of the political jargon out of it. And I believe he's good at that, being clear at what he believes and what he thinks, and helping people understand what they're going to be able to see from his presidency that takes some of the political rhetoric out of it.
You know, I've interviewed former President Trump 4 times. I've interviewed Biden 3 times, Kamala Harris twice. And what I find most interesting about all of them is the fact that when you talk one-on-one, former President Trump, namely right now, there is a degree of realness, and he takes the jokes out, and he's kind of real. And then he gets right on that rally stage, and he turns into a different person. So he's got to pick which direction to go in, and that's what you're saying. There's someone else who has strong feelings about this. Representative Noah Arbit, who's a Democratic lawmaker, and as you know on this show, we give people all sides of the story here. So let's listen to what he has to say about the Trump-Harris comparison. Again, what Representative Noah Arbit has to say about comparing these two candidates. Take a listen.
Well, I think that anytime Donald Trump steps onto a debate stage, all he does is talk about himself and his grievances, and how certain people are doing him wrong, right? And the fact is, Kamala Harris, as she said, the only client that she's ever had is the people, and the only client that Donald Trump has ever had is himself.
All right, let's talk for a moment about what Kamala Harris, even though you're leaning obviously and you're choosing Trump as what you hope will be the next president, what does she need to do to make sure that those felonies and the past stuff that's been so politicized, even if it be legitimate, this whole weaponization of the justice system that so many people feel, should she be steering away from those felony counts and talking more about policy?
Absolutely. I mean, she needs to highlight what she has done for our country. She's the vice president of the United States of America. She's the leader of the Senate, right? She has power, she has authority. As a black man, of course, I would love for the first woman president to be a black woman, but picking somebody because they're black has lost its luster, right? We want to be able to see change, and we need it in places like Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw, and places that are typically ran by Democrats. We need her to tell us what she's going to do that's a little bit different.
Do you think that, we know that during 2016, Hillary Clinton got it wrong. She thought she had so many places in the bag. She didn't. The mistake that both camps can make right now, what are those mistakes? Start with Donald Trump. What is he taking for granted right now?
I think right now what he could be taking for granted is the fact that he was almost murdered, right? In the moment of humility, being able to step back into that posture of feeling like your life could have been lost. I believe if he steps back into that broken and that contrite spirit, and he's able to articulate that in a way where people can be able to see that authenticity, I think that would be amazing. As far as Vice President Harris, I believe that she just takes black people for granted. I believe she hasn't been to Detroit, right? She has not come here. I've not seen her come.
She's been to Michigan and she's been to Detroit, but you're saying maybe she needs to spend more time.
Yes, absolutely.
In this area.
Yeah, I know she went to, I believe, Romulus or somewhere around there, but what is she saying specifically her agenda for black Americans? That's what I want to see, because typically they feel like, what? Democrats, I'm voting Democrat because I'm black, I'm going blue no matter who. I believe that she needs to be able to speak specifically to policies that affect black Americans.
You talk to your parishioners, the people who come to pray at your place every single week. What do they tell you is the most important thing? Are we getting it wrong in the media when we say it's the border and it's this and that? What are the main issues that you're hearing?
The economy, right?
That's it.
I mean, people want more money in their pocket. They want to understand how to be able to navigate school supplies. Do you know the average household is spending $875 on school supplies? People just want to be able to live what we would call the American dream.
And some of these teachers are spending way too much money to get their classrooms stocked up as well. So it's a lot. Yeah, and certainly there's a lot on the table, and it's all going to be unpacked, of course, on this debate stage tomorrow night that you can watch right here, by the way, that debate on Fox 2. And following the debate, we'll unpack it with another all-star panel right here on The Pulse. We thank you so much, Pastor Sewell, for joining us.